Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Northern Area Planning Committee. We had a very interesting morning, and we're now looking forward to an equally productive afternoon. Before we proceed, I must take a roll call of those councillors present in the meeting. So when I call your name, if you would unmute your microphone, indicate that you're here, and then remute. Councillor Andrews.
Councillor Andrews, Sherborne East, present.
Councillor Cook.
Councillor Cook, Shaftesbury, present.
Thank you. Councillor Les Fry.
Good afternoon, Councillor Les Fry, Dorchester West, present.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Hall.
Councillor Matt Hall, Sherborne West, present.
Councillor Brian Heatley.
Brian Heatley, Rodwell and Wyke, present.
Councillor Jones. We'll come back to Councillor Jones in a moment. Councillor Parker.
Good afternoon, Councillor Emma Parker, Puddletown and Lower Winterbournes.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Hello, Councillor Mary Penfold, Yetminster, present.
Councillor Val Pothecary.
Councillor Val Pothecary, Gillingham Ward, present. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Belinda Rideout, we have her apologies for this afternoon's session. Councillor David Taylor.
Hello, Councillor David Taylor here from Chalmers and St Mary, present.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Jones. Not with us yet. All right. Thank you very much. So moving on then to our agenda item 5C. This is for 60 homes, public space and play area at Thornhill Road in Strawbridge. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a reserved matters application. The principle of this development has already been established when outline planning permission was granted. We are now asked to consider layout, appearance and landscaping. I would then ask Senior Planning Officer Robert Lennis to present his report. Robert.
Good afternoon, Sherry and councillors. I'm going to share my screen with you.
We have the application up.
Can you see that presentation?
It's coming. Yes, now we can see it. Thank you.
Excellent. As the description there on the screen says, this is a reserved matters application. So the principle has already been agreed for the erection of up to 60 dwellings here. This reserved matters relates to appearance, layout, landscape and scale. They've also supplied a few additional details to discharge some conditions. So whilst councillors don't normally get to participate in the discharge of conditions, there is that this time around. The slide there before you are two slides. One is the aerial of the site location, and the smaller map shows you that the site is to the south of Strawbridge, and it also gives you, the reason I put this on here is to show you some of the other urban layouts from more recent development in this area of Strawbridge. This next slide is the exact location map of the site. And this slide here is the proposed site layout. In the design code, I trust you all have had an opportunity to read the report, so I won't be laboring on what I'd said in the report, but just giving you a summary of some of the details there. And in there, it's noted that the design code had pointed out three constraints, primary constraints to the site. One being Biburn Road, the other how it would address Greenfields, and the third Kingsmead here, the house to the west. This is how we are addressing Biburn Road. You'll see that they have the public open space here, and the houses are in terraces perpendicular to the site, and those are 20 meters away from the fronts of those dwellings. So there's sufficient space for views and not to be considered overbearing or resulting in any loss of light or amenities. I've been on site and discussed the matter with some of the residents there, along with Councillor Graham Carr-Jones, and this is the proposal that the applicant has come up with. And you'll see from the reports, we don't find there are any issues to be further addressed here. This next slide shows an exact measurement from the applicant of the distance from those bungalows in Biburn Road. Greenfields, they've amended the layout to show, to turn the dwellings and have rear gardens on the shared boundary, which is much better than what had been previously proposed. And so we are satisfied with that. And then lastly, the original layout had this plot 21 turn 90 degrees facing onto the rear of that Kingsmead. For some reason, they've turned it 90 degrees to front the road. And so we have no issues with the layout as proposed. The next few slides are to give you an indication of what the appearance and scale of the development is going to look like. They're all two-story dwellings, so that's your scale. Tick that box. And then the appearance, we'll run through it. You have 2-bed, 3-bed, 4-bed, and a block of flats. Here are the 2 beds. Generally, this is what they'll look like, subject to some of the material selection, and we'll come to that later. This is the example of 3 beds. The reason I have 2 lines here is this top appearance, these 3 are for a mid-terrace dwelling. That's 3-bed. That's why you're only seeing 1 side elevation. And this would be a freestanding detached 3-bed. So you're seeing the 2 side elevations. With regard to Biburn Road, I'd ask the applicant to go a little bit further to make sure there were no windows on the flank elevations fronting or facing towards Biburn Road, and to put in some diamond brick, alternate brick color for visual enhancement. And they are willing to do that. The side elevation does have a ground floor kitchen window, but with the boundary treatments, we don't think that'll cause any issues at all. This is the design of the appearance for the 4-bed dwelling. These 2 over here, if you follow the arrow, they have one style is a hip end, the other is gabled end. And then this is the block of flats that they're proposing. I've asked for some improvements to the window and sill design there, and that is a matter of condition that you will see at the bottom of the report. With regard to materials, it's mostly going to be brick dwellings. They do have some rendered proposed here within the site, and they've also proposed some flint on a few of the dwellings. This is not a conservation area. There are no other particular design constraints with this site, so the use of flint is not considered to be objectionable, and we've asked for a condition to show samples of materials prior to construction so we can see what the roof tiles are going to look like in the material. So we want to have one last okay on that matter. The next 2 slides are about boundary treatments. We did receive a late representation raising concerns with the boundary treatment. Let me start first with this low brick wall and piers. This is what's going to be along Biburn Road, and there were different options, whether it was going to be a panel fence, whether it was going to be a hedge. There was also the suggestion of a full brick wall there. The applicant has come forward with this design, which we find to be acceptable in the circumstances, in the context of the site. A couple other the treatments that you will notice here is the bottom one is a post and 3 wire. That's going to be adjacent to landscaping, and that was the concern being raised by one of the residents. And then this post and rail is around the proposed attenuation basin, and this top clapboard is between gardens. And here's the map and the layout of those boundary treatments. So the pink line is the post and 3-wire. And the next slide is going to show you that there's landscaping going in here. So our concerns were raised by one of the residents to the north here. I'm still satisfied that this landscaping proposal that you now see on the screen adequately addresses any issues that might be arising there with the neighbors. We are satisfied with the landscaping proposal. The landscape officer is satisfied with that. There's a good deal of tree planting. This site, because it's a greenfield site, it's going to look significantly different in 10 to 15 years time when these trees have started to mature. This is Biburn Road where the arrow is at the moment. And you can see that there are going to be some trees there, and that's going to be breaking up that elevation. Here is where's the arrow? This is the connection to the public footpath for an access issue. That was one of the conditions, and we're satisfied with that. This is the attenuation basin, and you will have noticed in the report one of the final sections in the appraisal regarding flood mitigation, and there's a holding objection still from our lead local flood authority. That's because the outline layout had a different solution to site drainage and flood attenuation. And the current information submitted with this application was not enough to satisfy the lead local flood authority. Be that what it may, we did put a condition on the outline application to say that prior to construction, this matter needed to be resolved. Details needed to be submitted and agreed. So the applicant is well aware of that. I've been informed this morning that they have some site visits arranged with the lead local flood authority, and the lead local flood authority is aware of our position that we're still recommending it for approval because we have the conditions in place from the outline. So we couldn't support a reason for refusal based on flood issues. The key matters, the planning matters that have brought this before you, I would say, are the neighbor amenities, particularly with regard to Biburn Road. Those neighbors have been most concerned. As you can see from the layout, we have addressed those concerns by maintaining an adequate distance and putting in boundary treatment that's going to be acceptable. The other key matters with any reserved matters application is the layout, appearance, scale, and landscaping. And as you've seen, those have been adequately addressed. With regard to the conditions there, you will have seen in the report that we've addressed most of those issues. A couple of the concerns that were raised, one was with the use of flint, which I've already addressed. This is not a particular design constrained area. And the other one was with low lighting. And that's why I have a condition on to limit the amount of lighting on lamp posts in the wee hours of the morning, because if they offer the road up for adoption, it's likely that the highway authority will turn off the lights after midnight anyway. But if they don't open it for adoption, don't offer it for adoption, then we have the fallback to have the low lighting at the night skies. Chair, we're recommending this for approval. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's all very clear. Could I ask Steve Savage then to add anything he would like on behalf of the Highways Authority? Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
The road layout you see on the plan before you complies with the guidance provided by Manual for Street and presents an arrangement that allows for good permeability and should keep vehicle speeds down to 20 miles per hour or less, basically by virtue of the various buff-coloured plateaus that you can see. Car parking meets with Dorset Council guidance. The dwellings have been allocated in curtilage parking spaces and visitor provision is all on street, except for a very few minor visitor parking bays. We've ensured that the submitted estate road layout has been tracked by a refuse vehicle to ensure that it can freely drive around the layout and collect the necessary waste bins. Now, the applicant has indicated that the estate road will not be offered for adoption under Section 38 of the Highways Act. Instead, it will be remaining private. Consequently, maintenance liability will remain the responsibility of the developer, the residents, or the housing company. And I must remind members that the applicant has no legal obligation to offer new roads for public adoption, should they choose not to. So in conclusion, Madam Chairman, the Highway Authority has no objection to the proposals and can also confirm that condition 18 of the outline application, which required the footpath link along the right-of-way and Bibbon Row, Lincoln to Lower Road, may also be discharged. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Now we have 4 statements from members of the public, and then we will hear from the ward member and then the applicant. So who's doing our reading this afternoon? Is it Jackie again?
No, Alison.
Alison.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Alison Sharp. Yes, right. Over to you. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Wiles.
You're not very loud, Alison. Could you put the microphone?
How's that? Mr.
Splendid.
and Mrs. Yes, better. Good. Mr. and Mrs. Wiles object. The previous layout was asked to be changed by the Planning and Urban Design Officer at Dorset Council because of the poor outlook for residents of Bibbon Row. Now, the same row of terraced houses that were in the middle of Bibbon Row have been moved further up and down and now are in front of bungalows numbers 1 and 5. This means we will have no outlook at all compared with all the other bungalows, as this house is only at the minimum distance away of 20 metres from our bungalow, and the view from our lounge will be directly into the gable end of the 2-storey house and at only 12 metres from our garden to our garden. This house, parking spaces and garden run along the whole frontage of our bungalow, just a few metres from our bedroom windows. Also, the noise from the cars and therefore will be overbearing and impact on our privacy and visual amenity. Turley's sustainability statement, the 3rd of the 9th, 2020 states 1.17, respecting the site's neighbouring properties with development setback to maintain privacy of existing homes. Why is it now deemed acceptable to have the same row of houses moved away from the 2 middle bungalows?
Alison, sorry, this is Democratic Services. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a lot of feedback on your microphone, and that seems to be widespread. Could you just check the connection into your laptop?
Yes.
Sometimes that's just it, or if you've got any electrical device nearby. Right,
yes.
Sorry about that.
Hang on a minute, I can turn something off over here that might be affecting it. Just a minute.
Thank you very much, Democratic, because it isn't very easy to hear, is it?
How's that? I can still hear a hiss, actually.
Yes.
Is that any better?
I'm not sure that it is.
I'm just wondering if you take the headset off, if that might help.
Well, I'm afraid my laptop doesn't function for sound without the headset, so I'm reliant on it.
We're headset or nothing.
Yes.
Persevere.
Yes. Okay. Shall I speak up? Is that if I put a bit more volume?
No, more volume actually makes it worse. So
oh, right. Okay.
More volume and clarity.
Righty-ho. Okay. So 1.17, respecting the site's neighbouring properties with development setback to maintain privacy of existing homes. Why is now deemed acceptable to have the same row of houses moved away from the 2 middle bungalows to give them an outlook, but not ourselves? There is only one other existing bungalow that looks into a side elevation. And that bungalow is now between 24 and 28 metres away, after the owners complained. Our ward councillor, Graham Carr-Jones, objected, saying, notwithstanding the required 20 distance has now been met, at that distance it continues to eliminate privacy to the bungalow garden boundary belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Wiles. Mr. Lennis sent us an email saying Sovereign is not prepared to change their proposal any further with regard to your property. All they have done is to hip the roof on the house, which makes no difference to the height. Sovereign had to change the distance to 20 metres of the two-storey house in front of us because they broke the condition of the outline planning permission. The orientation of the house had to be changed as it was stated by Sovereign's agent Turley's 3.9. The house fronts onto the roads running through the site, with the detached and semi-detached houses towards the western and southern parts of the site, and terraces towards the eastern end. The obvious answer would be to have bungalows on plots 16 and 17 kept at least the same distance away. There is a known need for bungalows and would be more in keeping with existing properties bordering the development site. Mrs. Edith Wiles objects. I am disappointed that plot 16 has not been moved, as this row of 3 two-storey terraced houses and car parking spaces are very close to my boundary, and the windows from all 3 houses, which are facing east, will overlook my bungalow and garden, which will create extra noise, light and pollution. I spend a lot of my time in my garden and feel my privacy will be compromised by being overlooked by these houses. The last layout was turned down because of the poor outlook for some bungalows in Bibbon Row. So now they have moved those houses in front of number 1 and numbers 4 to 5. Number 2 and 3 Bibbon Row are set back further than the other bungalows in Bibbon Row, and they are the ones who have a very good outlook, a large green space, a road and then parking spaces before there are any houses, which seems very unfair to the other residents. Bibbon Row has 5 bungalows and 3 of them would be severely affected if these two-storey houses are built so close to the boundary. There are several trees planted along my boundary that should be planted well away so as not to overhang onto my drive. As a resident of Bibbon Row, I stand to unfairly lose out significantly financially if the development is not sympathetic to surrounding properties. Mr. and Mrs. Worcester object. We write to object to the proximity of plots 16 and 17 on the proposed plan. The proposal states that the properties in Bibbon Row would face onto open spaces on the development. Not true. We at number 1 would face onto the blank wall of plot 17, along with 10 parking spaces, affording us poor air quality, pollution and noise. Whilst we do not claim the right to a view, we do claim the right to privacy and a non-overbearing outlook. This will only be proven once the properties are built. A suggestion that bungalows could replace the houses on plots 16 and 17 would go a long way to easing the situation. We note that a gatehouse is to be built at the development entrance, giving the site a unique character to passing traffic, whilst we in a Band F property have to look at the unattractive side of the development. Sophie Smith did raise the point of poor outlooks early on in the development of these plans. Whilst on the subject of plots 16 and 17, it has been stated that these were reserved for part ownership. This must be adhered to in future occupation allocation. The original grant of outline consent, dated 1st of March 2019, item 21, states dry layered coarse stone walls to mark boundaries. The proposed red brick with timber infill does not seem to adhere to the consent. We are also concerned that the risk of flood has not been properly addressed. The on-site tests were carried out during a period of very little rain and obviously provided acceptable results. We suggest, as recommended by FRM team, that tests are carried out during a wet winter period. Annette Cattle, Sovereign Homes, supports. Sovereign Housing Association is driven by its social purpose to deliver quality, affordable homes to meet the growing demands in the region. We recognise that poor housing conditions can impact the long-term health, prospects and potential of those living in them and put pressure on the services supporting them. Sovereign is committed to developing modern, fuel-efficient homes built to good space standards where people will be happy to live. We work closely with the Housing Enabling team at Dorset Council to ensure a continuing supply of much-needed affordable rent and shared ownership homes throughout the county. The association supports the Council's home building programme for 20,000 additional homes by 2033. Dorset is one of the most expensive places in the UK to rent or buy a home, forcing many people to leave areas that they can no longer afford to live in. Thornhill Road will provide 60 new affordable homes for rent and low-cost home ownership to those on the Council's housing register. The association is a not-for-profit organisation and the development will receive grant funding from Homes England as part of the Strategic Partnership Programme. Support for this site was received from Paul Derrian, Housing Enabling Team Leader, as part of our pre-acquisition scrutiny process. At the time, September 2018, there were 949 potential applicants on the housing register for this type of housing. This demonstrates the extent of need in the area. These 60 properties at Thornhill Road will provide local families with secure, affordable homes, creating a balanced and sustainable community, making it a great place to live. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison, and I apologise for the slightly poor quality, sound quality there, but we're doing our very best. Before we come back to Alison for one final reading, we will hear from the ward member, Councillor Graham Carr-Jones. Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, good afternoon. Obviously, as portfolio holder for housing, Chairman, I'm naturally delighted to have this 100% affordable scheme in my ward. Affordable housing for Dorset's people is incredibly important to this council. There has been some chatter locally that these properties won't be available for local people. But members, social mobility is not the exclusive domain of the private sector. If you need to move to Strawbridge for work or for family reasons from, say, Blandford or Sturmich to Newton, as some have done, there should be no barriers for doing so. The new Dorset-wide housing allocations policy that was out for a 20-week consultation and received more than 800 responses will, when adopted, set out quite clearly who will and won't be able to join the housing register and express an interest in a property in Dorset. To address this site specifically, and despite mine and our officers' best efforts over many, many months, I'm still slightly disappointed with the design layout. Primarily with the two-storey property smack bang in front of the property known as New Bungalow. Talks with Sovereign to provide an accessible bungalow in place of the two-storey house halted when they indicated they would require a three-figure sum in contribution to the scheme to meet their viability criteria. This layout remains the main stumbling block and why the scheme did not gain Town Council support. Now, I'm not asking the committee to refuse this application, far, far from it. What I'm asking you, if there's anything left within the constraints of the planning regulations to mitigate the unwelcome outlook that faces the current occupants of New Bungalow. There's a lesson here for Dorset Council in that we need to be far more robust with our registered social landlords and our private developers in planning policy terms. We must insist that accessible single-storey dwellings are provided on all large development sites. We have the evidence need from our housing register. Chairman, I know that the portfolio holder for planning is present, and I would urge him to take note of those comments. And two more things, the lighting and the responsibility of the trees. I'd like to understand from officers who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of the trees and who, what the lighting specifics are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We will hold those two questions until we get to question time. That was very helpful. Thank you. We are next going to hear from our final reading from the applicant's developer.
Aaron Wright, Turley & Co. Agent, supports. As members are aware, outline consent was granted in March 2019 for up to 60 dwellings, open space and vehicular access from Thornhill Road. In November 2019, a design code was submitted to Dorset Council, setting out the design parameters for the site. This was approved in December 2019 with the full support of your urban designer. My client has listened to the comments of neighbouring properties and met with them on site. Extensive changes have been made as follows. Reorientation and redesign of plot 21 to further minimise any impact on the neighbouring property Kingsmead. The separation distance between Kingsmead and plot 21 is 24 to 28 metres. Plots 16 and 17, closest to Biburn Row, have been reoriented so the front elevation fronts onto the new public open space. There are no first floor windows facing towards Biburn Row. The plots have been repositioned over 20 metres away from these residents. Residents in Biburn Row requested a hard boundary treatment between themselves and the application site. A new 1.8 metre brick wall with close board timber infill panels is now proposed to provide a permanent solid separation. The two-storey block of apartments have been repositioned away from the boundary with the neighbouring property Greenfields and replaced with rear gardens. The scheme is recommended for approval by the case officer and has the full support of your urban designer. There is no loss of privacy or amenity to local residents. The scheme incorporates high-quality open space that is accessible to new residents, and a footpath link will be incorporated into the scheme to promote connectivity. The proposed landscaping scheme will enhance biodiversity through native planting, enhancement of hedgerows and new tree planting. Sovereign Homes' approach to development is inherently sustainable, with their aim to deliver quality, affordable homes which meets the needs and aspirations of everyone. A sustainability statement has been submitted to demonstrate our commitment to sustainability. The outline consent was subject to 3 pre-commencement conditions relating to surface water and foul drainage. My client will work collaboratively with the drainage engineer and council before formally submitting a discharge of condition application. This reserved matters application is purely seeking approval for the siting, layout, appearance and landscaping of the site. All other matters will be dealt with through the planning conditions attached to the outline consent. 2. This scheme provides much needed affordable homes to local people and has been designed to ensure that it sits well within the landscaping without impacting on residential amenity. I would like to thank officers for their assistance in dealing with the application and for recommending approval for the scheme. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. And again, I apologise to everyone for the poor sound quality there. Alison was doing her very best. Before we move on to questions, while we have this slide on the screen here, could we just point out for Councillor Fry where plot 16 is?
Can you see that? Can you see the arrow there?
Yeah, that's very helpful.
That's
Good.
16,
Yes.
and this is plot 17.
Lovely, thank you very much. While you're composing your questions, and this is questions only, first members, if you would, we've had a couple of questions in from the ward members. So the first one is, who is going to be responsible for the maintenance of the trees and the lighting? Given the
2 separate questions there. On the
Yes.
first, let's take lighting first. The applicant will have to assign a management company to undertake maintenance and due care of the lighting in the roads. If, for whatever reason, they're found to be on after the time set out there in the condition, and we are notified, then we would take enforcement action to enforce that the lights are turned off and in accordance with the condition there. The second question, who's going to manage the trees? You'll see that condition 17 was about soft landscaping, and in there we have set out that they will need to notify us yearly for the first 5 years, I believe it is, so that the tree officer can go out and monitor the trees and make sure that they're acceptable. So it's in the details of that condition 17.
Thank you very much indeed. So I have now Councillor Fry would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got 4 questions I'd like to ask, please, if I may.
One at a time, if you would.
The first one, in relation to the size of the 2-bedroom houses, they seem very small. How do they fit with the national criteria for space per person in those properties, is question 1. Question 2, what are we doing about renewables, solar energy, water recovery to make these houses climate change compliant? Shall we call it that, please?
Let's let Robert answer those 2 first and then come to your next 2, if we may.
Thank you.
The size of the 2 bedrooms, size in the national guidance is just that, it's guidance. It's not something that we can enforce. I don't have the floor square meterage at the moment, and I'll have to look that up in a moment. You'll have to give me a moment to look up that information. I don't have it to hand. The solar renewable element, the applicant is not proposing any solar at this time. They have provided the statement that is online It's sustainable by its location and the fact that it's going to be meeting building regulations. And we cannot require anything beyond the building regulations there.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend, note my disappointment that they're not taking every advantage to an opportunity to make these properties properly climate and change, and compatible.
Thank you. We're in questions, Councillor.
Thank you. The post and wire at the back of the other properties that you mentioned, the post and wires, how high would the hedging grow there? Will it effectively, the fence disappear into the hedge in due course? And do you have photographs, another question, from the two properties that are going to be impacted by the tall properties, where the suggestion is that bungalows will be better placed? It will be good to see the impact that those properties will have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair?
Hedge.
Yes.
A hedge is a hedge.
A hedge is a hedge, and depending on how high you want to let it grow, will dictate how high it's going to be. Certainly, you see that they have a hedge with emerging trees placed in there, and that it is beyond their boundary, so to speak, because the post and wire will indicate what their boundary is. So they'll be entitled to cut what overhangs under their property, but the management company will be in charge of keeping that height, which we have set out to be somewhere between 1.8 to 2 meters in height.
Thank you. What are they actually going to be planted with? Do you know?
No, it's a bit too much detail for me at the moment. I have it here on the screen, but let's see if I can enlarge it. No, I can't enlarge it through that way.
That's fine. Thank you, Rob.
I'd have to, what we look for is native hedge planting. So it's a mix of plants so that it's a robust hedge and conducive to wildlife as well.
Thank you, Robert. That's helpful.
Yes, it is there in the report, the answer to that question. So, Councillor Jones, you have a question?
Yes, please.
Oh,
Thank you. Is there anything we can do to ensure a minimum maintenance standard on the roads if they're not adopted? Only I know what happens with roads that don't become adopted and are owned by Sovereign, and it's quite shameful. I just want to see if we can do anything in terms of our considerations in that respect.
Chair, my understanding, and Steve will have to back me up on this one, is that the first step is the Highway Authority agreeing the dimensions of the road and the materials that it's being built out of. After that, it's down to the maintenance company.
Right, Steve, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, that's certainly correct. There's no obligation on the Highway Authority to comment or check on the actual as-built highway, as it were. We have been assured by the applicant they will be building it to adoptable standards, but that it won't be offered to us. So that may give Councillor Jones some surety. As for who inspects the works after they're done, it isn't the Highway Authority. It would be incumbent, I guess, on the Planning Authority to ensure compliance with the appropriate condition.
That's the best we can do for an answer, I think, Councillor Jones. Not in the overall schemes, very, very satisfactory.
No, thank you.
Councillor Penfold was next with a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I wondered about the improvements to the footpath. I just wondered if somebody could update us on what they may be. Is that the surface?
Yes, typically that is the surface, but what the details were showing us that they, in the design of the scheme, they're putting in this link here to the footpath as step one. Steve, did you want to comment on that, please?
Well, again, that's an internal footpath link which is being provided. The surfacing would indicate from the drawing that it's going to be a tarmac or a solid surface. They're not carrying out any further works to the existing right of way, though.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chair, can I digress to a comment earlier? Councillor Fry had asked about photos, and I didn't have, well, I had some, but I don't, they seem to have been deleted off my phone, so my apologies there. Biburn Road is a private road, and you can see here in the aerial photograph what the lay of the land is like, but also you can see how other modern development, especially up here, has been laid out and is at actually a higher density than what you're seeing in this site here. So 20 meters is not written down anywhere, and that tends to be more of a rule of thumb for houses that are back to back, so rear gardens facing each other, as opposed to, say, if you imagine in a conservation area where you have a road and it's a narrow road and houses face onto the road. Quite often those houses on either side of the road will be less than 15 meters apart. That's not uncommon, but in this case, we have agreed that 20 meters is a good distance, and that the outlook, both if you consider the design that we've agreed here, you'll see the diamonds that we put in at first floor level, and the fact that the neighbors at Biburn Road are going to have this boundary treatment there, we find that on the merits of this planning application, because we can't redesign any application here, and nobody's trying to do that, but the merits of this case as proposed, I can find no reason to recommend refusal, and that's why we've put forward the recommendation for approval with conditions to you.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Robert. Councillor Andrews, you're in and out like a fiddler's elbow. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Madam Chairman. I just want to confirm something, that when you put an application in, you have a right to light, but you don't have a right to a view. Am I right in saying that?
Yes. Alas, nobody has a right to a view. It's one of the tragedies of the English planning system. Yes. Have we, ladies and gentlemen, have we any other questions, or would anyone like to begin the debate on this application? Somebody has something. Yes, Councillor Hall, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The boundary for the top left of the picture that Robert's got on our screen, which is going to be a mixture of post with 3 wires, I think he said, and then native hedging. Can I ask why we're not having some form, or suggesting some form of more permanent fencing along there? Because native hedging is really good for the environment, etc., but tends not to be that evergreen. So with a plain wired fence and non-evergreen planting, it could be potentially quite open for the existing residents for quite a few years until certainly things mature. So I just want to know why we're doing that, or suggesting that.
That's a fair question, and the long answer is I considered different types of fencing there. If you have a closed board fence there, then the new dwellings don't see the foliage on the other side, and it becomes a bit of a
fence.
Well, not only a fence, but you have a run back there of varying degrees, and it's hard to maintain for the owners. If the post and wire and allowing the hedge to grow, because it's outside of their site and the management company can't address that, I just felt it was a better solution in the context of this, what is currently an open field. I agree it could be 6, you know, you have different choices there. And based on this one, could I refuse it? And I came to the conclusion, no, I couldn't recommend it for refusal. But certainly if you wanted to change that, I suppose we could address it by way of condition to say that units number 1 to 9, or plots 1 to 9, shall have closed board fencing along the rear elevation. But that's, with all due respect, that's one person's preference over another's, and you're the councillor, you've got the choice there.
Yes.
Can I hold back on that, please?
Yes, please.
It was just Robert, a principle that, you know, we could have within the condition that although we're suggesting the native hedge, but that we could put something in, for example, that native hedging including a certain percentage of beech, because beech is native, beech holds onto its leaves quite long periods of the winter, and then we just add to.
Yeah,
just a thought.
That's why we have the landscape and trees officers.
Yeah.
Unlike me, they specialize in plant life there, and they've given me their seal of approval on this one. So I've gone with that recommendation. I don't have the full list of the plants in the hedge there that's on the screen in front of you, but certainly it's been online for a few months now.
Yeah. Okay.
We have had this before when we've been second guessing our tree and landscape officers in committee, and I have tried to avoid us getting into that situation. They are our experts and they have signed off this plan. So unless you have looked at the plan and seen something actually wrong with it, I'm a bit reluctant to be second guessing their work, because we employ them to do this on our behalf. Councillor Hall, what would satisfy you on this?
Oh, and it was just a query and just a thought of mine. I'm not going to lose sleep over it, and I'm not suggesting that the officers don't know what they're doing. It's just not how I would do things. So I'm just passing comment. I'm not trying to create trouble.
No, and absolutely not. And the point is, we know that your comments in this area are particularly valuable because of your own personal expertise. Are you content to leave it as it is? I don't want to prevent you from suggesting a change to the conditions, but I'm not really hearing very much anything very helpful that we could do with this.
No, I'm okay.
Okay, that's very kind. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Taylor.
Hello. Can I have the original plan of the works put up, please, with all the houses? Yeah, that one. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. If you go to the top corner where there are 1, 2, 3, 4 houses, was that the area 16 that you were talking about?
This is units 17, 18, 19, and 20.
And these people at the bungalows just across the Bibbon Row, are they the ones complaining the most about the views going in?
2 of the letters read out today. One was from this neighbor, and one was from this neighbor here. So New Bungalow is most concerned with unit 16, and number 1 is most concerned with number 17.
Would it be more convenient if you put the houses that are there in that top right corner and put them down to the bottom instead, where they're orange patches, or is that a problem?
Again, Councillor, we're not, no offense, and with all due respect, we're not here to redesign the scheme. We have to make an opinion based on what's before us, and my recommendation is set out clearly in the report. No, I appreciate your suggestion. I've been working with Councillor Graham Carr Jones quite a bit on this scheme, and as I said, I have been on site more than once to visit some of the neighbors, both at Bibbern and at Greenfields, and we have a scheme that we're recommending for approval.
Okay, thank you.
And we have to decide whether overall it is acceptable or not. It's understood that we have listened to and sympathised with residents who are going to be inconvenienced.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add to this? I'm not hearing anybody speaking very firmly against it. Is there anyone who would like to propose this, that we accept this application? Anybody out there, please? I would like a proposal.
Chairman, I'm happy to propose it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Can I have a seconder?
I'll send you a second.
Who's that?
Let's try.
Councillor Fry, have you seconded it? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Thank you very much indeed. We are prepared to accept this for approval as conditioned. Could we have the recommendations up on the screen, please, so people know exactly what they're voting on while I call for a vote? No, apparently not. Sorry, Robert, thank you. I do like to have the recommendations on the screen so that it's clear to everybody what we're voting on.
Right, Chair, I'm going to have to go to the committee report.
Well, all right then.
Sorry, Chair, point of order, no debate on this one. No
Sorry?
debate. We've had questions, there's no debate.
That was the debate. Did you? Sorry, we were having a debate.
We were having questions.
Well, I did open the debate quite some points ago. If you would like to carry on having the debate, heaven forbid I should cut you off. Did you have another point you would like? Right. If you have another point you would like to make, Councillor Andrews, please go ahead now. Sorry, Chair.
I'd just like to say that my concern, once again, affordable housing scheme, there's going to be a sinking fund, so it makes it less affordable for maintenance of trees, etc. So I'm a bit concerned about that because trees are very expensive to maintain. And I do quite like the fencing that Councillor Hall was talking about and hedging. I do quite like that for ecological reasons, you know, hedgehogs and little rodents, etc. So I'm fully in favour of that, keeping it as a hedge. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Right, I'm really not wanting to rush you, colleagues. Does anybody have anything else they would like to say about this application before we go to the vote? I'm not seeing anybody indicating here. That's absolutely fine. We are now ready to go to the vote. As I call your name, please tell me. Thank you very much, Robert. Well done. Please tell me if you are in favour or not of approving these reserved matters subject to conditions. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Cook.
4.
Fry.
4.
4.
4.
Heatley.
4.
Jones.
4.
Parker. 4. Penfold.
Madam Chairman, I have to abstain as I briefly lost my connection.
Thank you very much. Apothecary.
4.
Taylor.
4.
That's excellent. That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then to our next agenda item, which is item 5D, to build 61 homes in Brewton Street in Marnell. Now, this application was agreed in March 2019, but it's back before this committee because following a number of further discussions, the NHS has withdrawn its request for Section 106 contribution. So this represents a change to the agreed planning conditions, and that being the case, the application therefore must be referred back to members because there's been a change to the conditions. There are no other material changes, so it's quite a small matter, but nonetheless we are required to have another look at it. So essentially we are being asked to confirm the permission with the change Section 106 condition. We're not, of course, bound by the previous decision, but we would have to have grounds relating to material changes sufficient to warrant a refusal at this stage and to come to a different view than the committee did previously. So that's just to explain what we're here to do with this. Robert, this is yours again. You'd like to give us your report. Thank you.
With all due respect, one correction there. It's not a change to the conditions, but a change to the terms of the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you.
The legal agreement and planning obligations. And as set out in the report, we received a number of requests by the NHS Trust for various large applications, many of them at the very last minute about at that time. And in discussions with them, we are working with the NHS Trust, and we have been working with the NHS for a while So we were a bit surprised to have it come in the way it did. And then when we pointed out to them that it actually doesn't meet the regulations, they did understand, and they have withdrawn their request for contributions on all of the applications that they had submitted. So it wasn't just this one, there were many of them. And back to the report, it was an application for up to 61 dwellings here. And this is the site outlined in red. And you can see it's just to the north of the site. Here's a map of the constraints. The pink lines are public footpaths. The green lines here are for the conservation area. And the buildings outlined in pink are actually listed buildings. So let me back up. You'll see this is the site. So it doesn't technically touch the conservation area, but it is part of the setting of the conservation area and the listed buildings. And those concerns were addressed. With regard to the illustrative layout, of course, it's illustrative and won't be binding, since this is for the principle of development and the access details only that are being agreed. But this gives you an indication of how the site might be laid out. The two-story dwellings, so the scale is not or would not be typically great, and the layout could comfortably fit within the site as outlined and give good margins on the boundaries for landscaping. Here are the access and road realignment details that were submitted at the time, and the highway engineers were satisfied with this, and there was quite a bit of discussion at that time, but those have all been adequately addressed. And this gives you an idea of the site sections and the scale of the development in context. So if you follow the arrow, this is the extent of the site here, and you can see how it fits in with the distant views. And then again over here you have the other section. Beg your pardon. So the key planning issue, as set out by the chair and myself, is whether the development is acceptable without the NHS Trust contributions. Clearly, we think we are achieving quite a bit of good things with this application in terms of the amount of housing, affordable housing, and contributions to the local community. Chair, back to you. We're recommending this one for approval again, subject to conditions.
Thank you
and the
very
signing
much.
And the signing of the Section 106 agreement, which, as set out in the report, has already been signed.
Yes,
it's ready to go.
Good. I'm not sure if Steve, you want to say anything from the highways point of view, if you have.
Not particularly, Chair, but obviously if members got any questions regarding the application itself, more than happy to answer them.
Two very much indeed. So there you have it, members. We have two members of the public to hear from and the ward member. So if our reader is ready again to give us our first objector.
Thank you. Mark King objects. Our family live next to the proposed entrance to the development. Living there, we are very aware of how dangerous this piece of road already is. It is a completely blind bend that causes cars to be thrown across to the opposite lane travelling one way, and for drivers to cut the corner travelling in the opposite direction. Adding access from this bend will only increase the risk of accident. This section of road is also a very busy thoroughfare with no pathway and can be quite dangerous for pedestrians, especially in poor weather conditions. Again, add in another entrance exit and it becomes more dangerous to people who have no choice in using this stretch of road. I would also like to raise a major issue of noise and privacy, which would be greatly impacted by this development. Not only would our garden be overlooked thy houses, creating more noise and light pollution, but with a constant flow of people and traffic passing our garden as the main point of access, we would no longer be able to sit in privacy and relax in our garden. This would have an adverse effect on my already poor mental health, which is a key reason to why we moved to the property originally, the privacy and peace. I would also like to raise the issue of flooding. Our garden already experiences some flooding with runoff from the fields when we have persistent rain. This can only be made worse when water has a direct route via paths and roads and nothing to soak up a proportion of the water. This also applies to the road, which runs like a river and causes major issues of aquaplaning for cars. Also, the access is completely blind due to high banks on either side, forcing you to pull into the road to see. I hope these issues can be raised and taken into consideration at the forthcoming meeting. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We will hear next from Ward Member Councillor Graham Carr-Jones. Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. Getting ready. Chairman, yes, there's a broad acceptance that Marnell can take some development, although this application is not particularly popular, but given its previous planning history and that planning's been granted, it's hard to argue forcibly against it, really. Chairman, the parishioners would rather not have street lighting in the development. Marnell doesn't have street lighting currently, but if it has to have something, could it please be sympathetic and considerate on this scheme? But mainly, Chairman, your new members most especially have an opportunity now to right a terrible wrong. And I'm going to ask your committee, please, can you put a condition on this application that conditions the speed limit on Brewton, on that street there, on the road, Brewton Street, down to 20 miles an hour. Marnell Parish Council Watch have been gathering evidence, but obviously since our newfound pandemic, that's kind of all stopped, and the traffic movements were obviously not so great. But as we get back to normal, it's a small, far little road. Please, Chairman, if we can gain anything back from this unpopular development, it would be to allow us to have that 20-mile-an-hour limit. And I know, Steve, we've spoken about this many times, and we've had conversations in County Hall over this one. Marnell Parish Council are already going to try and get some 20-mile-an-hour zones across Marnell. They're gathering the evidence. You could do yourselves a great service and just condition that to a 20-mile-an-hour limit, Chairman. I thank you and implore your new councillors to take heed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We must hear the rest of our public presentations, and then we will come straight back to that point, because I think I know what the answer is going to be. We are now going to hear a presentation on behalf of Savills, the applicant, the developer. Alison.
Steve Clark, Savills, agent, supports. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, we are grateful for this opportunity to address you regarding the above planning application and welcome your professional officer's recommendation to approve the application. The application before you was previously considered by the Planning Committee of the former North Dorset District Council on the 26th of March 2019. The Planning Committee resolved to grant planning permission subject to conditions and completion of a Section 106 agreement. The only reason that the application is now before the Dorset Council Northern Area Planning Committee is because since the previous resolution, The Council's officers no longer consider that the NHS contribution requested meets the necessary policy and legal tests. Furthermore, the NHS Trust has also withdrawn their request for this contribution. The Section 106 agreement has now been prepared without the NHS contribution, agreed and completed by the applicant and council officers. As set out in paragraph 3.3.2 of the committee report, the council continues to be unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and there have been no other significant policy changes since the previous Planning Committee's decision in March 2019. The application benefits from no objections from any statutory consultees. It is therefore considered that the application continues to represent sustainable development with no impacts that significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits of housing delivery. The applicant would also like to confirm to the Planning Committee their agreement to the additional condition suggested in the committee report for the provision of electric vehicle charging points on site in response to the Council's climate emergency declaration. The committee report addresses the single reason that this application is brought in before the Planning Committee again, and explains that there have not been any significant policy changes since the Planning Committee made its previous decision on the 26th of March 2019. We therefore hope that you will endorse your officer's professional recommendation to enable the prompt delivery of new homes that would make an important contribution towards housing delivery and addressing the lack of 5-year supply in the local plan area. That's all, Chairman.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for all your reading, Alison. Members, we will now take questions, and while you gather your thoughts there, I will go to Steve to answer yet again the question about Planning Committee's conditioning speed limits.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As you probably recall, I have mentioned before, traffic regulation orders and planning permissions are governed by separate legal processes, and we generally don't recommend that they are tied as planning conditions because it gives anybody who's opposed to the planning application a second bite at the cherry, if you like, and that they could object to the TRO being implemented. Now, if you were minded to approve a condition, you could use the words best endeavours to undertake to implement a traffic regulation order, and if it fails, obviously the trigger is the best endeavours. The normal procedure, and I have spoken to Graham at length on this over many years, is that the parish would normally go to Dorset Highways themselves and request that a TRO be implemented, and then the necessary procedure would be carried out. What I would say in this particular instance, though, is that as Robert's showing on the plan there, the site itself is located basically to the west of what is a speed controlled bend. So the speeding isn't an issue around the bend as such. If you did speed around the bend, as one of the objector was indicating, I think you'd only do it once or twice before you ended up in the bank or the hedge opposite. So I couldn't say that it was essential to deliver this particular planning application as such. My advice, I'm afraid, would have to be that the TRO would be pursued through the normal channels, which I believe that Marnell are currently doing. And if it was deemed necessary and the vehicular flow along the road was sufficient, then it was something that could be considered. But my advice would have to be, don't tie it to the planning application.
Well, that's very helpful. That's very clear advice, and that is, of course, the advice you give us and now and again when this does come up, because members will remember this is not the first time that we've been asked whether or not we can condition a speed limit. I'll leave it to members to say whether or not you want to pursue that further, because I don't want to lead you here. But the next question that we have, before I come to Councillor Apothecary, who also has a question, is on the question of street lighting. Now, is there what are the arrangements for street lighting, or do we not know at this point? Does this
Chair,
outline?
From my standpoint, those details haven't been supplied, and they won't be supplied until we get the layout details, and we can consider it at that time. I'm sure the applicant is listening in at this time, and it's clear they'll want to address that. They don't want to hold up. They could propose a low-level bollard lighting or something similar, very low to the ground. So there are options there. They can still have lighting. It just doesn't have to be.
Always the option for no street lights at all in our villages. But thank you. But yes, so in answer to that question, that is a matter for a later application. But the applicants are listening. Thank you very much. Councillor Apothecary, you have a question.
Sorry, no, it wasn't a question, it was a comment.
Right. Can I know if anybody has any questions? No questions, Councillor. Carol.
Councillor Cook, I did put a RTS in at 3:05, but
did you? I beg your pardon. It's because I've got people putting comments in the chat box, which I have asked not to have. Councillor Cook, your question.
Thank you. Well, it's two questions. Firstly, I noticed from the report that you wrote, Robert, there is currently a 40% affordable housing allocation within this application. Can I just ask, are you allowed to give details of how much the NHS contribution section 106 was going to be? And whether we have within our powers a way of asking for an increase maybe in affordable housing to make up that what the developer was not going to or what the developer was going to give to the NHS, whether we can ask for that back with a slightly raised from that 40% affordable housing figure.
Robert.
Chair, with all due respect, I think to take that line would put us in deep water. The NHS Trust, their reasoning and rationale was not correct, so we couldn't support that. What we have been able to achieve in the 106, like we do with every application, is to the best of our abilities, so that it will be legally binding.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear what you say. Thank you.
Thank
Robert.
you. Thank you. Councillor Fry, is this a question?
Thank you. Yes, Robert, I've been to Marnell a few occasions, as you're aware of, a particular site up there. Can you give me the orientation of this site compared with the other one?
Certainly, Councillor. If you give me just a second, I'll go to the first slide. So the site that I think you were involved, or you may have visited for various reasons, is over in this area, and this is the site where it's in question. So
that's really helpful.
Down Brewton Street. So Brewton Street comes like this. That's the main flow of traffic, and here's the turn off into the bend where you have the site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any thought of renewables being included? I hear the car charging, but
this is an outline application, Councillor. So those matters will come back to us with the next application. This is outline only.
Chair, we could, since it's an outline, we could ask for an informative to be added that as something to that effect.
That would be most helpful, thank you. And I think sometimes we're too late to ask for this to be included, and it needs early inclusion. Otherwise, we get told it's too late now.
Yeah, as I said, Chair, I suspect the the applicant is listening in, so they will have heard this discussion, but we can also include the informative, say the council would like to see sustainable energy solutions put into the design, something to that effect, if you can allow me that latitude of wording.
That would be good, but also consider the rainwater collection and recycling and such issues such as that.
Okay.
Councillor Fry, if we could agree the principle thing and let Robert negotiate the details.
Absolutely, more than happy with that. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, or Councillor, since it's an informative, you're welcome to email me and give me some details of any specifics you'd like.
Yes.
Thank you, will do. That's really helpful. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones, is yours a question?
It was about Section 106 monies. I'm just wondering that it seems to have taken us 18 months since the application was previously heard to decide that one part of that Section 106 money was not going to be paid. I wonder whether we should be reviewing the other Section 106 monies and their specific spend requirements. We're sort of 2 years down the line now.
On what ground?
Should we be looking at that? Should we be? I'm asking because the original application went in 2018. It was heard and passed or approved in March 2019, and here we are in September 2020. And I just feel a little bit sorry for the applicant, really. I'm just wondering whether we should be reviewing the Section 106 monies that were passed in 2019, as we're now 18 months down the road. Are they still right and proper in the direction that they were going to be spent? That's it.
Thank you very much. Robert, would you comment on that question?
Yes, I'll try. Specific, I did mention this earlier, specific to the NHS Trust, they have withdrawn their request for Section 106 money because of the it lacked the robustness to be able to retain it. So if it would have been challenged, we'd end up having to give the money back to the developer anyway. So we've written back to the NHS Trust as soon as we found out this information and we agreed in our table discussions, several that we had with them. We wrote to them directly and said, would you please withdraw your request? And they have duly written back to say they withdrawn the request, and then we've proceeded similar to this basis of what's happened in this application. So I don't know if there's anything to review. If it comes up as an issue, we are obliged to bring it back. Otherwise, you've already seen it. Yeah,
no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get to the point. It seems to have taken 18 months for that to have been reviewed, which is quite some time.
Yeah,
I'll leave it. Don't worry. Thank you. Don't worry.
Yeah, Chair, if I can pick up on this point, there are several Section 106s that are pending signature, and the legal agreements go to and fro, back and forth between the solicitors, the applicant, our solicitors, and myself. And there are many reasons why they take a bit of time. It's unfortunate. We do our best to get them out as soon as we can.
Yes, it is a negotiation. The thing is, the Section 106, it is a negotiation, not a shopping list, and negotiations can sometimes take a while. But I am not hearing any reason why we would revisit all the rest of the Section 106, and we have had a fairly firm steer from Robert that would be quite unwise to try and recoup more Section 106 from the developer just because the NHS offering has been taken away. So I think we've had a fairly firm steer on that. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to go to Councillor Pothapry, who wanted to make a comment.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
Thank you, Chairman. It's interesting to hear Steve Savage's comment regarding the TRO for a reduction in speed. I would very much like to propose that we do our best endeavours for a TRO. My knowledge, limited knowledge, I should say, of traffic regulation orders is that if they are supported by an outside body, shall we say, other than a parish council, that it does add a bit of weight to the consideration of them getting on the list. So I think any comments we could make to support the parish council in applying for a TRO to reduce the speed at this particular area. Obviously, there's a huge amount of public concern here, and I do feel we ought to be helping, although it's really outside of our remit. But I think some sort of suggestion, or might just help. I like the 40% affordable housing. All in all, I'm very happy to propose approval of this application.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Pottery, and thank you very much for your remarks about the best endeavours for the TRO. I'm inclined to agree with you, having worked with many villages over the year to try and get 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is actually a very onerous task and can be very hard for town and parish councils to do this. So I agree, if we can give a little bit more power to their elbow, I would support you in proposing to do that. So we've had a proposer. I have Councillor Heatley next. Heatley, Find Andrews. Councillor Heatley.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm afraid I'm looking at this in a very simple way. We have here a developer who got planning permission in principle for this development 18 months ago, and then for reasons that, as far as I can see, are nothing to do with that developer, we are now considering the whole thing again. Now, I always thought planning permissions were things that a developer ought to be able to rely on, and I do find it a bit odd that we are reopening so many bits and bobs, even though I'm sympathetic to the renewable energy and the 20 miles an hour and so on. Unless there's a very good reason, surely we shouldn't be messing with this. Or have I got it badly wrong?
No, thank you, Councillor Heatley. I clearly didn't explain this well enough, though I did try and explain this at the beginning of this discussion. The reason it is before us again for further consideration is because the NHS has withdrawn its request for a Section 106 contribution. That constitutes a change to the planning agreement, which was passed in 2019, and therefore it must be referred back to members because it constitutes a change. So there is it's exactly the same application as before with all its strengths, and which is why it was passed, but there is a difference, being that the Section 106 contributions are now different than they were then, and we have therefore to have another look at it and agree it again. I hesitate to call it a technical matter because we are not, of course, bound by the previous decision, but that's why we are we must consider it again because the agreement has changed. It's that simple.
I understand the technical reason. I am arguing that in terms of procedural justice, it's a bit odd to be reopening it again when the developer has had this agreement in principle for some time. But
well, I think I have answered that. We are obliged to look at it again because the Section 106 contributions has changed. We are not obliged to change it, and I'm not hearing any great movement to change it here. Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. I just fully support Councillor Apothecary's comments about supporting the TRO, but my question's really aimed at Steve Savage, if he could please, Steve. I'm very conscious that 20-mile-an-hour zones are hard to enforce because who can enforce them? In principle, I'm supportive of that. Are there any other options that could be considered? I know Marnell reasonably well from quite a few visits there from a previous development. The roads are narrow, people do go around there quite quickly, and as somebody like myself who doesn't know my way around particularly well, you could be coming around the corner facing a car coming quickly from a local or the other way. Are there any other options such as traffic calming, traffic chicanes that could be considered in that area to support and assist the 21-hour zone? Thank you.
That's right. Robert, could you pull up the drawing showing the highway improvement, please? The first point to address there, Councillor Fry, is the issue of that tight bend was one that I discussed with the applicant prior to them putting this application in. They had two problems with it. The first, they had issues with the visibility to the west due to a high bank, and the second was because I didn't like that particular bend. To resolve both issues, they've had to build the carriageway out slightly, and in doing so they've widened the bend, so you shouldn't be going around that bend and crash head on into a car coming towards you. And if you look at the bottom right hand drawing, the green area is the intervisibility between a car in one direction going around the bend and seeing another. So with regards to this particular development, the mitigation required based on the traffic generation was that they carried out the improvement you see before you. There was no requirement for any other speed reduction measures to be implemented because speeding wasn't realised as an issue when this application was considered. Now, I hear what you're saying about Marnell roads, and I'd probably argue they're a little different to the majority of roads in lots of small Dorset towns and villages. I think it's a good idea if you wish to pursue the TRO, but you quite rightly say with regards to criteria and support, the police need to support the TRO, and enforcement is always an issue, as you're well aware. Is there an issue with regards to this particular stretch of highway with speed that would necessitate a TRO being implemented for 20 miles per hour? Personally, I think it's unlikely, but obviously that could be proven. If you're asking if anything else could be done with regards to traffic calming, well, physical traffic calming with build-outs or plateaus requires generally lighting and signing, which we don't always want in rural areas because it can look pretty horrible. There'd be the issue as to where it would be put, that people would accept it. And I suppose the third issue is we don't tend to traffic calm in isolation. We tend to do whole settlements or areas outside of schools and this sort of thing. So I don't think that an isolated 20-mile-per-hour zone here would be a solution to perceived speeding problems in Marnell. And I think my final comment would have to be that it isn't speeding per se which is the issue, it's the drivers who are driving too fast without care and caution. And I'd like to think of us all as sensible drivers. We wouldn't drive through there doing 30 mile an hour. I can assure you it's very narrow. It's a 20-mile-per-hour section of road for a safe driver to drive around that bend and then out to the west. So I would, sorry to say, I think it's bad driver behaviour as opposed to the actual physical road conditions.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you for your update. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your help. And I do think, ladies and gentlemen, we are in some danger here of straying into matters that are more properly the concern of Marnell Town Council in the first instance. I don't think they would thank us very much if we were to condition traffic calming measures without them having asked for them. So let's, if you would be content, I think if we will leave it at the proposed condition for the best endeavours for a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I think that's probably as much as we should do. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak. We have had a proposer.
No, whoa.
Yeah.
RTS, I'm under Let's Fry.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Andrews. Yes, that's because I'm seeing
Comments from Car Jones.
Comments. Could you please not put comments? I beg your pardon, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. So the TRO, you've just spoken about that. I fully support what Steve Savage said. Let the Town Council do it through the proper process and get the zone within Marnell. We shouldn't even be talking about it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. So anybody else? Right. I have had a proposer and a seconder. Can I just clarify, because I'm hearing different views? I think that we are wishful to include, there is the proposer and seconder. Are you wishful to propose including a new condition that we should use our best endeavours to undertake a TRO to introduce a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on that stretch of road. So that's best endeavours to introduce a TRO introduce a 20-mile speed limit. That's the best we can do. Are you proposing that it, including that condition? I think you were.
Chair.
Yes.
I must say, from a professional planner's position, that putting a condition on with that woolly of wording would be difficult to enforce, which is one of the criterias when you write up conditions, is are they enforceable? I just wanted to flag that up to you.
Well, I'm happy to, that's very helpful. I'm happy to take that advice. I am a little uncomfortable about this myself, because we do seem to stray into areas. These are conditions for the developer, and I'm not sure that it's in the developer's gift to use his best endeavours to introduce a TRO. Would you be happy, committee, if we have discussed this at some length, and Steve has been listening, and I think we can send back a message to Marnell Council in our minutes that we absolutely support their endeavours to get a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. But I'm not hearing that it's very wise for us to condition this. I'm open to contradiction, but that's what I'm hearing from our officers. Proposer and seconder, how do you feel about that?
Sorry, Chairman, can I interrupt
Please
here?
Do. Yes.
I don't think we could condition it either, but I do think a committee recommendation that we support parish,
yes,
Marnell Parish, would be appropriate.
Right, we have made that recommendation. The committee is recommending that we support Marnell Parish, and that we would like to see highways, Dorset Council Highways, use their best endeavour, and that's a recommendation from us, but it's not a condition. Right, so we are now putting this matter to the vote without any new conditions, just as it was presented to us. Could I now take you through the alphabetical list to see how you would like to vote? Councillor Andrews.
4.
Cook.
4.
Fry.
4.
Hall. 4. Heatley.
4.
Jones.
4.
Parker.
4.
Penfold.
4.
Porthackery.
4.
Taylor.
4.
Excellent. Right, that is carried. Thank you very much indeed. You will be pleased to know, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no urgent business for us to discover. So I will actually now bring this meeting to an end at 3:37, and thank you very much for a very long day to councillors and to officers. You've all worked very hard indeed, but I think we can call this a reasonably successful meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherry. Well done, officers.
Thank you.